Well, hello, I'm Doug Apple, back with another special interview for you today. And the question on the table is, where do our rights come from? And we're going to talk about our founding documents and what they say, but we're going to start by talking about what U.S. Senator Tim Kaine said. He believes that our rights come from our government, and the notion that our rights might come from God is extremely troubling to Senator Kaine. So what is the story? What's the story behind the headlines? We're going to dive into this subject with our favorite attorney and Christian commentator all the way from Culpeper, Virginia, Mr. Mike Sharman of Share Healthcare. And Mike, for those who haven't heard about this latest brouhaha from Senator Kaine, why don't you go ahead and bring the listeners up to speed?
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks, Doug. So Senator Tim Kaine is the senator from Virginia, and he was Hillary Clinton's running mate. He was her choice for vice president. Before he was the senator, he was the governor of Virginia. Before that, he was the lieutenant governor of Virginia. Before that, he was the mayor of the capital of Virginia, the mayor of Richmond. And before that, he was on the Richmond City Council. So since 1994, he's represented Virginia. And Virginia, as most everybody knows, regardless of what part of the country you come from, is where Thomas Jefferson is from. And Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. So that kind of sets this conversation up. So at the beginning of September 3rd, there was a hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Senator Kaine is on that. And by the way, it's not spelled like biblical Cain. It's Kaine, Cain. And so Senator Kaine was on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the person that was being questioned for a nomination was not one of the cabinet heads. It was one of the deputies that still needs confirmation, but not a particularly, not the head of an agency. And so Senator Kaine asked him about something that was in that nominee's written opening remarks, and the nominee quoted his boss, which was Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio was quoting the Declaration of Independence, saying that our rights come from God, not from government. And so Senator Kaine, in the only questions he asked this nominee really, said to him, he said, the notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from government, but come from the Creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. It's a theocratic regime that's based its rule on Sharia law and targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. They do it because that they understand what natural rights are from their Creator. So, he concluded, the statements that our rights do not come from our laws or our government is extremely troubling. Okay. So what's extremely troubling is that a person who has been in Virginia government and then United States government since 1994 does not know that our nation was founded upon the exact opposite. He had it entirely, completely wrong. It was extremely troubling that he didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or knowing that, he intentionally ignored it to get across his viewpoint that government controls you, government gives you your rights, and if government doesn't give you your rights, you don't have them. Okay, so to be able to back up what I just said and to let everybody know what Senator Kaine said was 100% totally wrong, here's what our Declaration of Independence said. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. He had it entirely wrong. Because we have rights that are given to us by God, but because there's people out there that might want to take those rights, we need a government, not to give us our rights, but to protect us from others who want to take away our rights that were given to us by God. I mean, Senator Kaine could not be more ignorant on this subject. E.W. Jackson, who's a radio commentator, former presidential candidate, and he was a candidate here in Virginia for lieutenant governor, and he's a pastor also. When he was commenting on this, E.W. Jackson said, you'd have to give Senator Kaine 200 IQ points just to get him up to stupid.
Oh, gosh.
I know. That's pretty direct. But you either have to think that after, 31 years in government, Virginia government, that he's completely avoided having read or heard about the Declaration of Independence. You'd have to think that. Or he's intentionally lying so that the idea, the public policy gets out there that we get our rights from government.
Yeah, well, he's not an ignorant person. You don't become a senator by being truly ignorant. So he must have an agenda. Well, he definitely has an agenda. So my 8th grade biology teacher, Dr. Delabar, and the fact that Dr. Delabar was teaching in a public school for an 8th grade biology class kind of lets you know that he was so irascible that nobody else would hire him. But Dr. Delabar said, you can have dumb, which is somebody's inability to actually learn more. They just intellectually do not have the capacity. They can be ignorant, that is, they have the capacity, but they haven't learned yet. Or they can be stupid, that they have the capacity, they have learned, and now ignore what they've just learned. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we all can see which category Senator Kaine fits into. And it's not only troubling, it's extremely dangerous. Because if government gives us our rights, then government can take them away anytime they want.
Mm-hmm.
And if government gives us our rights, then we have to idolize government because it's the author and the creator of whatever freedoms or limitations we have. That's wrong. But also, it puts our belief in God, our God of the Bible, the God of the Bible who was the foundation of what all of our foundational documents say, was the God of the Bible. Well, it puts him on an equal plane with all these other false religions. The various Islamic denominations, the Sunnis, the Baha'is, etc., that he's talking about. And what he misses is the part that the authors of our Declaration, upon which the Constitution was based, recognized that it was God of the Bible, not some other God. Our rights don't come from the Sunni or Baha'i or Islamic view of God. Our rights come from the biblical God, very clearly so. It's not even seriously debatable. And yet he wants to ignore it. And if you see the video of him in this discussion that he had, or actually not discussion, but the lecture that he's giving to the nominee, he's just scornful and sneering.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very elitist. He has his glasses up on his head and just looking down at the person and sneering, and saying, well, this is extremely troubling. No, it's extremely troubling, Senator, that you would have, rather than just sit there and be quiet, which would have been a whole lot better, you opened your mouth and let everybody see that you are, as Dr. Delabar would have said, stupid. You have the capacity. You have the knowledge, and yet you're ignoring it. And you think we're so stupid or dumb or ignorant that we wouldn't know the truth. Well, let's kind of break down the Declaration of Independence here.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's go back and give our listeners the foundation for how our country was built, where our rights come from, and why we believe that.
So July 4th, 1776, we're in the 250th year of celebration. They sort of launched the celebration July 3rd. They began it of this year, 2025, for the 250th anniversary. Began that to go on to when we're going to have the big celebration, July 4th, 2026 for our 250th. So That's where we mark the origin of our nation. Sure, we were colonies before, and we didn't yet have the Constitution. The Constitution was September 17th, 1789. So, but 1776, July 4th, is when our nation began, when we declared ourselves to be no longer a colony. We declared ourselves to be independent of the monarchy. We declared ourselves to be a new sovereign nation. And when they, we have this, the declaration that is giving this phrase that most everybody knows, we hold these truths to be self-evident, etc. Well, right before that, they talk about the laws of nature and nature's God. In that, the very first phrase there, the laws of nature and nature's God. And then they go on to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Well, those writers at the time knew that the laws of nature and nature's God was referring to the main legal theorists at the time, the main legal scholars. That's what they would refer to as God's law, God of the Bible, because he had created nature, and he is nature's God. In the beginning, God. They knew that. It was not a debatable point, regardless of which denomination those signers and representatives that we sent to the Constitutional Convention, or the Declaration Convention there, the Continental Congress, I'm sorry. So we hold these truths. We, that collective view of the colonists who are now going to become citizens of a new nation, we hold, embrace these truths. Which truths? The ones that are following what their statement there. We hold these truths. It's not, we think these arguments, we hold these positions, we believe these points of view. No, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Now, many of the people that were at that Continental Congress and writing up and drafting and discussing what they were going to put into this Declaration of Independence and then voting upon it, many of them were lawyers. And even the ones who weren't lawyers knew the law well, because they were the representatives within their communities. They were the power structure in their communities, which makes this revolution so much more interesting, that the people who would benefit from the status quo did not want the status quo. But they knew the law. Well, the law of evidence normally requires you to bring in witnesses to something or bring in a document that's been authenticated, things of that nature. But they said we hold these truths to be self-evident.
Self-evident.
Self-authenticating. You don't have to do anything else to prove it. By themselves, it's obvious that all men are created equal. All men are created equal. Well, what about slavery? What about women, etc.? Well, they had these ideals in their mind at the time, and they talked about it at the time. And they knew that in the fullness of time, the reality of that statement would become true. Mm-hmm. The political reality of it would become true. But the truth of it was self-evident to them even then. But what they were having to do, and why did they still continue slavery, etc.? Well, at the time, they knew we have to do this unified. We have to come together on the things that everybody, slaveholding states, non-slaveholding states, can agree upon. And that's what they did. That all men are created equal. The slaveholding representatives, the states and slaveholding representatives, and the ones who personally held slaves, voted for this, knowing they were talking about slaves, Indians, etc. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed. Well, an endowment is a term of inheritance, or that you are the beneficiary of an endowment trust. It's not something you earned. It's something that's given to you. And remember, we had that phrase, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that they are self-authenticating. Well, if you have a will that you've written in your own handwriting and you sign it, well, if somebody can show that is your handwriting, that's all you need to have. But if you have a will, whether it's typed or handwritten, and you have your signature on it, and you have two witnesses sign also, that is a self-authenticating document. It needs nothing else to prove it. And we are endowed with these self-evident truths. We've inherited them. Where do we inherit them from? That they are endowed by their Creator, with a capital C, with certain unalienable rights. Okay, unalienable, what's that mean? Because obviously the ones in slavery and the ones in prison had lost them. Or maybe some that were captives of war had lost them. Well, no, they hadn't. The rights are still inherent in that human being, because everybody's created equal, and everybody's created with these self-evident rights that they have. Somebody else might be trying to obscure or restrain them from being able to exercise those rights, but they still have rights. And if you're being restrained in your rights, that's why you get to go to court to get somebody to stop restraining you in your rights. But if government was to give us these rights, and we try to go to a government court to enforce some other right that we believe God had given us, we lose over and over every single time. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And it's interesting that they capitalized rights as well. Mm-hmm. That it is, they wanted to be emphatic about it. Creator is capitalized because it's a proper name. Rights was capitalized to make it that much more emphatic. That among these are life, capitalized, liberty, capitalized, and the pursuit of happiness, capitalized. Those are the rights, the sum total of the rights that we have. There's nothing that you have the right to exercise, that the right to hold. There's nothing that you have that doesn't come into one of those three categories: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And happiness, they knew biblically, was happy is the man who has a good job, happy is the man who's found a good wife, happy is the man who has a large family. Family life, our marriage life, and our business life is that happiness they were talking about. And then we need liberty to be able to pursue those things. And we need to be able to have our lives protected so that we can try to have an exercise of that liberty to pursue that happiness.
So how different was this, from the Declaration of Independence flowing into the Constitution, into the Bill of Rights? How different was that, and is that, from the other governing documents around the world at the time?
It was revolutionary. And what made it particularly revolutionary was that next phrase, that to secure these rights, whose rights? The individual person's rights, every single individual. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers, their correct powers, their right powers, from the consent of the governed. Okay. That to secure these rights for the individual, not to secure what the monarch wants, not to protect the government or the Politburo or any of those things, but to secure the rights of the individuals that are inherent in them, that are self-evident in them, that are unalienable. To secure those rights for each and every individual, that's why governments are made. Not to protect a power base, not to protect not to have a more peaceable and orderly culture. Although if we have the protection, that will occur. But we are not a fascist state, bring Mussolini in so he can control the crime. We're not that. We are a nation that says, because each individual has a right to protection, each individual has a right to keep from being pushed in front of a oncoming subway train. Each individual has a right to be protected from having some crazy person who's been arrested 14 times from stabbing you, totally unexpected, while you're on the subway. Each individual has the right to be protected from another crazy individual who just wants to shoot you because you are debating any and all comers. That's what these rights are that we have: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which each one of those examples I just gave, those people were struck down with it. That's why governments were instituted, to protect the individuals, because those individuals, every one of them, was created by God with certain rights. And those rights, the government derives their correct powers, their just powers, from the consent of the governed, not from the monarch, not from a patriarchy, which says the elder son inherits everything, including the kingship, on and on and on. Our governments are only there to protect the individual's rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the government only gets its power by our consent. When you go to vote, you are giving your consent to be governed by that person that you are choosing. So choose wisely, choose well, choose thoughtfully, choose with knowledge.
Tim Kaine compared this to these other governments around the world. How are those governments built?
Well, they aren't built with the idea of protecting the individual. They're built with the idea of protecting the power base. Russia, the only thing that is the reason for government in Russia is to protect the power base of the elite people there, which, even though it's no longer the Soviet Union, that power base has not changed. I mean, there's no secret that Putin was one of the leaders in the KGB, which its purpose then, the KGB's purpose, was to protect the power base. Mm-hmm. With in Islamic countries, it's the Islamic Republic of whatever that particular nation is, and it's to protect that power base. And they do not believe that people have rights from Allah. They have responsibilities to Allah, and Allah is always looking at you with a frown, wondering what you're going to do for him next. Mm. And there are not many rights. The presumption of innocence, even in many civil law countries, the presumption of guilt is there first, and you have to prove yourself innocent. Why? Because the government has the rights, and the government is the one that gives you whatever right you have. You have to prove that you deserve it. We are a revolutionary nation, and the countries that have best modeled themselves on us, which is pretty rare. I mean, even look at Canada, which is probably one of the most analogous to us. They didn't have a written constitution until just a few years ago, and they still do not have a Bill of Rights that give people the right to religious freedom, et cetera. That's why you hear of the incredible arrests that are made up there every now and then. On and on. The nations that just asked for a Palestinian state, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, France, and none of those have their foundation of their nation based upon the God of the Bible, or that the rights come from the individual. Because if so, they couldn't be asking for a nation to be created out of nothing. And the most recent thing that the people group, and the power base, Hamas, really, did was to massacre others. Well, no country that actually believes that our rights come from God, and we all have those inalienable rights, would ever vote for that, or ever propose that, or to support leaders who did.
I heard that our Constitution is the longest running Constitution in the world.
It is, which also means we're the longest running government. You might hear sometimes with parliamentary nations such as the United Kingdom, they say that the prime minister is being asked to abolish the government and call for a new election or something, because the government is that ruling constitution, that ruling party at the time. And France has had many constitutions, many revolutions. Britain has changed its way of governance many times. We are the oldest government on the face of the earth, and we're the oldest, longest-running constitution by far. You look at many of the states that within our nation, they've had constitutions, but many of them have undone the Constitution, not just amended it, but created a new one, which is their right in our republic. I had a elected official call me recently and say there's this big debate that we're having in recognizing what's the 250th, and some wanted to say that we're recognizing the 250th anniversary of our democratic republic and others wanted to say we're at 250th anniversary of our constitutional republic. Well, which is it? It's the constitutional republic, because that's what makes us a nation, to be able to govern ourselves. The Declaration of Independence is our Articles of Incorporation, so to speak. It's what created us to be a nation. But we couldn't function well. We were still, a whole lot like a bunch of jumping beans in a small box, just kind of going up and down, colliding against one another with our 13 sovereign states out there. They really had no cohesiveness until we had done the Constitution. And that's what forms us. That's what holds us together. That's what allows us to have one voice speaking to the international community. The Constitution does that. That's what gives us a supreme law of the land with the Supreme Court, which lets us have some final arbiter of what's going on. That's why we have one national legislature, the U.S. Congress, House of Representatives, and House of the Senate. That's why we have a national president. But that's the final say, and our Article 6 of our Constitution actually says that the Constitution and the laws of the federal government shall be the supreme law of the land. Okay. And the courts are also. All right, well, we did that. Who did that? The states did that. Well, how'd they do that? By their representative government. So we're a constitutional republic in which people vote democratically to elect their representatives. We don't have a push the button and vote now. We have vote for your representative, who then, by the majority of the people, not 100% of the people, but by the majority of the people, is going to express that will and that vote of that majority of the people in whatever body that person's in, whether it's the town council, the state legislature, the U.S. House of Representatives, the Senate, or as the president. But the Constitution also is a very strong limiting tool. If we exercise that, my first day in constitutional law in law school, the professor asked, when is something not constitutional? And so, hands go up, and, well, when somebody's taking away your rights, this, that, and the other, he said, no, only when a court says it's not constitutional. How do you get that? Well, somebody has to complain. Somebody has to actually say, what you're doing is not right. So for so long, we've been having unconstitutional thinking and unconstitutional goings-on, which Senator Kaine is, the exhibit A of why that happens. He either is ignorant of what our founding documents actually say and do, or he wants us to ignore it, so he has more power as a senator to do whatever and say, this is the right you get, you don't get any more. That's extremely troubling.
Well, falling under this category of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, let's jump into the one silo of healthcare as we wrap up our time here with Mike Sharman, who is the legal counsel for Share Healthcare. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in regards to our healthcare, because, of course, the government, many for good reasons, I'm sure, but wanting to leech the fingers of government more and more into a stranglehold of healthcare versus giving the people life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So talk about that as we close up today, Mike.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm the legal counsel for Share Healthcare, which is a 501c3 nonprofit whose particular mission is to help Christians share one another's medically necessary medical bills. And how does that tie into the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? Well, you would not want to spend your healthcare doctor bills on going to a doctor who's an abortionist. You would not want to be going to a hospital that performs abortions in the room right next to you where you're having your operation. You would not want to go to a doctor who does transgender, or a hospital that does transgendering and destroys children's bodies and their lives forever. And likewise, you wouldn't want to be spending your healthcare dollars on an insurance company or being part of a state exchange program, exchange plan that does the same things and pays for the same things. So with Share Healthcare, because we're not insurance and we're not we're outside of the mandates of the Affordable Care Act, then we are able to be abortion-free. We're able to be abortifacient-free. We're able to be free from the mandates of transgendering destruction. So we promote life and give you the ability to promote life in that way. And then liberty, we have medical freedom. You're not constrained by what is in the plan, so to speak. You don't have a network that you have to do unless you want to think that every licensed medical professional in the world is your network. You get to choose which one is right for you. And your doctor gets to choose what they're going to do. They aren't going to be mandated that you must give vaccines, and you're going to get a bonus if you do. I mean, that's the case for a lot of doctors. Your doctor gets to choose what medical care is right for you. And then the financial liberty, financial freedom. We're $149 per month for a single, $249 for a couple, $349 for a family of four, and $50 for each family member after that. So that's a whole lot of financial freedom, a lot of financial liberty compared to the average of $2,600 for employer-provided insurance for a family of four across the nation. And then the pursuit of happiness. This is really good for people who do want to be able to put the emphasis on their family, who are entrepreneurs or small business people, who want to be able to just go about their work and their family life, resting as comfortably as they can in the knowledge that they're trying to live by what God would want them to do with God's people as best as possible.
If people want more information about Share Healthcare, what do they need to do?
Well, go to our website, sharehealthcare.com, sharehealthcare.com. Look around there, write down your questions, and then call 1-844-SHARE-HC, 1-844-SHARE-HC. And do that within regular business hours and ask them all of your questions.
All right. Again, sharehealthcare.com or 1-844-SHARE-HC. And our thanks today for his expertise. That is Mr. Mike Sharman. And for Wave 94, I'm Doug Apple.